Hey guys, and welcome to my channel. I'm Elizabeth with Ellie's Handcrafted Jewelry, and today I'm going to be showing you how to create this fun crown ring. They are such amazing statement pieces, and they can function as a stylish fidget ring as well. So if you or someone you know has anxiety or just the need to fidget, these are really great. And if you guys are excited to get started, hit that like button and subscribe to stay up to date on the latest videos. So let's get started. Now for materials and tools, you're going to need a ruler, a ring mandrel, 4 segments of 20 gauge wire, so you'll want to see the description below for the length you need, 28 gauge wire for weaving, a 6 or 8 millimeter stone, chain nose pliers, round nose pliers, and flush cutters. And you'll also need 2 millimeter or 2.5 millimeter copper beads for the fidget portion. Now I'm going to go ahead and determine what I need for the length of the band. So I'm trying to create a size 5, but I'm going to measure at a size 5.5 so that I have plenty of room for the wires I tuck underneath the band. And I'm just using a scrap piece of wire that I've had, and I'm going to go ahead and trim the ends there. And that way I have the exact length that I need to weave for the band. So I'm just going to pull that off the mandrel, straighten that out, and then I'm going to use that to figure out how much I need to weave on my 20 gauge wires, and it's just going to be the center of that. Now once I figured out how much I need to weave, I'm going to go ahead and take my 28 gauge weaving wire, grab one of these segments of 20 gauge wire that I have, and starting at the first Sharpie mark there at the bottom, and I'm going to wrap my weaving wire around this base wire 3 times to start the weave. Now I'm going to grab the next 20 gauge wire and set it there, making sure that the Sharpie marks do match one another, and then proceed to wrap my weaving wire around both base wires, then bring it in between those 2 base wires. And then I'm going to grab the next 20 gauge wire and set it on top of that one. And then I'm going to wrap the 28 gauge wire around the 2 middle base wires, I should say the 2 upper base wires. Bring that in between the top 2 base wires, and then do the same with the next wire. And this is going to start my weave. Now I'm going to bring this weaving wire in between the 2 top base wires, and then I'll wrap that around the top base wire and then down behind all of the base wires to start then at the bottom again. Taking the weaving wire and wrapping around the bottom base wire 1 time, and then wrapping it around the 2 bottom base wires 1 time. Then I'm going to bring that weaving wire in between those 2 wires that I had just woven together to start the next one, and then wrap it around the 2 middle base wires, and then bring it in between those 2 base wires, and then up and over the top 2 base wires, in between those 2 base wires, and finally around the top base wire 1 time. And I'm just going to go ahead and show this to you again, just to kind of help you get familiar with it. Wrapping around the bottom base wire 1 time, around the bottom 2 base wires 1 time, then bringing that weaving wire in between those 2 base wires, wrapping it around the 2 middle base wires, and you'll notice that I'm pushing the wire down with my fingernail as well, making sure that those weaves are nice and compressed, bringing that wire then in between those 2 base wires I just wove together, to wrap it around the top 2 base wires again, and then bring it in between those 2 base wires and around the top 1 time. And we're going to continue doing that until we reach the next Sharpie mark on the opposite side. Now at this point you can use a clamp. This is a spring clamp that I use. This is really good for helping if you have weak hands or a hard time holding those wires together. This is a great way to do it as well. Now once you've woven from Sharpie mark to Sharpie mark, we're going to go ahead and cut off a tail piece, probably 8 to 10 inches worth. The longer the better, just to make sure you have enough to weave with. Now this is the inside of the band, so I'm going to go ahead and set that on top of my mandrel at the size 5 mark, and begin wrapping my band around the mandrel carefully. And you're going to notice that I kind of moved the ring down the mandrel a little bit to compress it a little bit. That's just to make sure that it is round, it's nice and snug around that size 5.5 actually. And there should be a little bit of a gap between the woven parts. This is where the stone is going to sit, and we'll move on to this next step. Now take the weaving wire and direct it underneath the band, pulling the tail piece all the way through. From there I'm going to grab my chain nose pliers. You can also use your flat nose pliers, and I'm going to go ahead and flatten that space there where the stone's going to sit just slightly. Now when I've done that, I'm going to go ahead and take my weaving wire and direct it over the top of the band and wrapping it around the top base wire one time. And then I'm going to bring it underneath the band like we did previously, pulling it all the way through and then wrapping it over the top and around the top base wire one time. And we're going to continue this until we reach the other side of the woven piece. And this is just a little close-up so that way you kind of get a better view. Directing it underneath and then over the top and then around that top base wire one time. Now once I've completed that, I'm going to go ahead and wrap that around that base wire one time just to secure it. And then I'm going to grab my little stone or cabochon and lay it on there and make sure that it sits in that space just nicely. And then from there, I'm going to go ahead and wrap my weaving wire around that base wire one more time just to kind of finish off the weave, and then do the pull and twist to twist off that excess wire. And then this is just kind of what it should look like so far. And now I'm going to go ahead and separate these base wires a little bit. So the outside wires should be separated from each other, and then the middle two base wires should be more close together because those are going to be woven together. Once I've separated the base wires a little bit, I'm going to take these inner base wires and I'm going to direct it over the top like so, doing the same on the opposite side, directing it kind of over the top of itself and creating these loops over the top, and this is going to help secure the stone on top of the ring band. Now once I have these loops kind of figured out as to where I want them, I'm going to go ahead and stick my stone in there and begin to wrap the wire underneath the bands. Of course, situating the wire over the top of the stone, making sure that it covers enough surface area that it doesn't slip out. From there, I'm going to begin wrapping the base wire there underneath the ring band and pulling it through, making sure to hold the top of the ring a little bit so that way it doesn't go too much out of shape. And of course, repeating this on the opposite side. And don't pull too hard on those base wires, otherwise you'll kind of distort them or make the stone pop out. So just be careful to do that as you're working with it. Now once you've gotten the stone set in place, we're going to go ahead and trim off the excess, making sure that there is enough to go over the top of the band, and tuck in the wire with our chain nose pliers, and repeating that on the opposite side. And this is just kind of where we should be at this point. From there, we're going to pick up our weaving wire again and begin weaving those two inner wires. And we're going to go ahead and start with that middle wire and wrap the weaving wire around that base wire 3 times to start the weave. From there, we're going to take the weaving wire and wrap it around the inner base wires 2 times. And then wrap it around the middle base wire 3 times. And then we're going to wrap around both base wires again 2 times, and we're going to go ahead and continue this until we've reached about anywhere from 6 to probably 8 rotations. So a rotation would be 3 times around the wire and then 2 times around the wire, and that would be 1 rotation. So because I'm using an 8mm stone, I did about 9 rotations, which should be enough to go around to the other side. But before we do that, I'm going to go ahead and pull and twist, take off the excess wire, and then begin to bend the wire, wrapping it around the stone just next to the bare wire until we reach the other side like so. But before I secure those base wires around the band, I'm going to go ahead and do a pull and twist to take off the excess weaving wire, and then begin again coming around this stone. And then I'm going to go ahead and take the base wires and feed them through the ring band and out the other side like before. And we're going to basically do what we did with the first wire and pull those over the top and then cut them off with the flush cutters, leaving just enough excess to go over the top of the ring band. And now I'm just tucking those wires in with my chain nose pliers. And now that we finished with this side, we're going to repeat all those same steps on the other side with the 2 middle base wires, and then we'll move on to the next step. This next step, we're going to need 2mm copper beads. And I'll leave a link in the description below to where I get them. Now for the 2mm copper beads, we're going to go ahead and feed them onto this last base wire, just like so. And it's really going to vary based on how big of a stone you're using and how big the ring is going to be as far as how many you need. I didn't actually count how many I used, but probably anywhere, it's safe to say, probably around 10 to 15 on either side. Now once you've fed all the beads onto the band or the base wire, we're going to go ahead and wrap that around just like we did with the previous wires and make sure that it sits nicely next to it. And you want to make sure that there is a bead kind of at the edge of the ring band. And once we get it situated where we want it, we'll go ahead and feed that base wire through the ring band and out the other side. And we're going to trim it and tuck it just like we did with the previous wires. So now grabbing my flush cutters and trimming off the excess, and then we're going to go ahead and tuck that in with our chain nose pliers. And just be careful as you're adjusting, just making sure not to leave any tool marks or to damage any of the beads. Now once you finish this side, we'll just repeat that on the opposite side. And here's the finished piece. I hope that you guys all enjoyed this tutorial. If you'd like to share your piece, you're welcome to join my Facebook group where there's a place to share and encourage one another. And if you found the tutorial helpful, hit that like button and subscribe so that you don't miss out on the latest videos. And have a great day!